One of the cruelest ways the damage shows up from neglect and abuse in childhood is that we go through life either alone or in relationships where we're not loved, not safe, and not happy. It's not supposed to be that way. And if you have childhood PTSD and you're wondering why you keep attracting people who are either not functional, not into you, or outright hurtful to you, you're going to want to watch this video. My name's Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I teach people how to heal the symptoms of complex PTSD and childhood PTSD. And having relationships with the wrong kind of people is definitely one of those symptoms. That is how my childhood trauma manifested for me when I used to live my life stuck in a loop between alone and in a bad relationship, one or the other. I'm making this video for those of you who are in that loop right now, and if you're actually in a good relationship, keep watching, because what I'm going to teach you here can be applied to a lot of other aspects of life, like work and creativity and fulfilling the dreams and goals that you have but haven't achieved yet. But let me focus on romance. Basically, if you had trauma as a kid, romance is one big area where you can end up with not just less than you really want, but with something you never wanted. You try to meet someone you like, who's a solid person, someone you can trust, and even when you think you found them, they let you down. They push you away, or they turn out to have some giant problem, like they're already in a relationship, or they have an addiction, or they just can't be there for you for one reason or another. And you wonder, why didn't you see it coming, right? If you're like a lot of people with childhood PTSD, it's not even clear how this blind spot happens. Everything seemed so good, right? They said all the right things. There were promises made. Your heart flew wide open to them, and you were feeling really good about it. And then, bam, you find out how wrong you were. And the horrible truth is, a lot of us stay in those relationships, if they don't leave us, for no better reason than we just can't face the prospect of a breakup or of being single again. It's too triggering of old abandonment wounds. So we hold on as long as we can. Whether it ends now or later, we lose years of our lives this way. So if this is familiar to you and you're drained and you're confused, I want to tell you why this experience, this moment where you just lost what you thought was a good relationship, is an incredible opportunity to heal, not a tragedy, an opportunity. Now, when you get pushed out of a relationship with the wrong person, whether you know it or not, you've just taken a big step closer to the right person. Because right now, your path is clear. With some healing, the right person can find you. So if you're feeling ready for this good thing to happen, to meet up with the right person, I have some advice for you. The job in front of you is not to run out there and meet someone, not yet, but instead to raise the brightness of what I call your cab light. Cab light. Do you know this term? You know how taxi cabs have a light on top, and when the cab light's off, it means there's already a passenger in that cab. But when the light is on, hey, it's free. Well, this is a metaphor that refers to the vibe of someone who's ready and open to meet a really great new person, a cab light. Now, what happens when your cab light won't come on? Has this ever happened? You feel ready to meet someone, you're thinking about it all the time and maybe reaching out to people and putting in a lot of effort, but it's like no one can see you. You're not attracting interest, or you're attracting interest but not the right kind or not the right people. That's a broken cab light, by the way, where you're trying to meet someone but the only ones noticing you aren't anyone who's safe or appropriate or available for you. And if you're feeling anxious to meet someone, it's tempting to rush in and think, oh, I can just make it work, right? Have you ever done that? I have, where you bond with that person and then realize who they actually are, and then spend the next 2 years or so trying to retrofit them into the person you hoped they were the first time you met. And you know how that ends, right? Now, when your cab light's working properly and it comes on, good people show up in your life. People who are appropriate, wonderful, totally happy to be with you. So how do you make that happen? How can you get your cab light to shine bright in just the right way to attract just the right person for you? I'm going to tell you, but let me first explain what may have been standing in your way so far. If you grew up with trauma like abuse, being demeaned, neglected, going hungry, not being protected from danger, these hardships, even when they're over, can leave traces all over your life, wounds, blind spots, pockets of low self-esteem that kind of leak out even when you're on your best behavior. So for example, if your aim is to have a family, then you would only want to attract people with the same goal and who are capable of, caring for kids, earning a living, supporting life as a family. And if you want to have a marriage, then you'd only want to attract a partner who could do that, who's free to marry you, as in not already married and able and willing to make a lifetime commitment to you if things go well. So the question is, if you're not attracting these things, if you're getting entangled with the wrong kinds of people who can never be what you want or aren't even trying, what are you communicating about yourself that's leaving these needs of yours just dangling out there unmet, unseen? If you're not attracting what you want, your cab light is not working. So you can think of a working cab light as the set of signs that you give off that a partner who's a good fit would be looking for when they meet you. Healthy people look for the signs of what they want, and they stay away from people who communicate something different than that. The people who don't really care what signals you're sending are the messed up people, the people who aren't healed yet, or the people who are actually looking for not love, but a quick fix relationship. And for them, the stakes are really low. They don't care. So if you're not clear who you are and what you're seeking, then your cab light can't communicate it for you. And in that case, you're going to get whoever you get, but not who you want. Now, I'm simplifying it, but this in a nutshell is how we end up in empty and miserable relationships, blaming the other person. But really the problem began because we were carrying around enough trauma that we just couldn't shine a light that could attract the kind of person we wanted. Now, the good news is you have the potential to change this, and it starts in here, healing the hurts that dim your light. And you do this both through brain healing and through a loving and honest self-assessment around where you might be putting up a barrier between where you are and where you want to be. Now, what kinds of barriers am I talking about? Well, maybe you're not taking care of yourself, or you're letting TV and spacing out take up all your free time, or you're being way over busy, or this is a big one, you're isolating. Nowadays, it's easier than ever to do that. And if this is your tendency, I urge you to fight it, and to fight the 100 ways that your light gets turned off right when you need it. So what else are some things that hide your light? Being already in a relationship that's not healthy or happy for you. For one thing, bad relationships, they wreck your sparkle and they squash your confidence. And though you might be thinking that you can hold on for a while until you meet the right person, healthy people don't want to meet you like that. They don't want to be involved with people who are already attached or with people who are too insecure to be on their own when that's the right thing to do. You want a person who's picky like that, not someone who gets into a relationship that's compromised or demeaning. You want someone who cares about themselves enough to hold out for a good person, someone bright and shiny and whole and available. That's what healthy people do. So how can you tell if you're sending signals that you're not truly available? This is where a loving and honest self-assessment comes in, to ask yourself if maybe there are barriers you're putting up that are keeping the good partners away. Addictions would fall into this category. Drugs, drinking, and porn, for example, are all things that people feel like they're doing privately, but in reality, they change your energy, they change your countenance. And unhealed people might not be able to tell the difference, but healthy people can tell pretty quickly, and they're not attracted. Now, carrying a lot of anger is another barrier. Also, having a lot of drama or conflict in your life. Not that you can always control this, but a lot of times a pattern of drama and conflict could point to a lot of wounding and a high probability that this is what you'd bring to a relationship. So just like addictions and anger, drama and conflict deserve to be at the very top of your list of where to focus your healing when you're working on getting that shine up in that light of yours. Another barrier is when your romantic energy isn't contained within you right there, right, ready to be shared with another person when the time is right. You could be leaking that potential, that emotional availability all around you with maybe staying too connected to an ex or two or three, or being caught up in casual relationships where you have some vague plan to just get rid of those people if the right person comes along. You know, it's easy to think that it's a small thing, and if no one really knows about it, it won't affect your ability to meet someone new. But you know what my experience is? It dims your cab light. And healthy people who are looking for someone intact and capable of sharing their lives in a good way are just not likely to be interested in someone who has one foot in another relationship. Even if that's a fantasy relationship, healthy people can sense that too. They're looking for a bright cab light, and that's someone who is totally present, mostly healed, don't have to be perfect, and free of past entanglements. Now, it might be harsh to hear, but I'm telling you, it's a very powerful shift to make. This is all stuff that I teach in my dating and relationships course for people with childhood PTSD. And if you're interested, I've put a link to that in the description section below. But I've found people with a rough childhood can have great relationships. It just takes a little extra healing sometimes. People ask me sometimes, what's my favorite video that I've ever made? And I want to share it with you here. I taped this on this little funky desktop setup back in April 2020, just 2 weeks into the lockdown. And I had no access to professional equipment or editing or hairstyling. But this is about my absolute conviction that if you long for a great love in your life one day, it really is what you're meant to have. And I know that may sound weird because my reputation today is as a source of tough love advice for people who magicalize romance. I also think it's a bit telling that I was talking about a crisis of emptiness in this video, little knowing just how terrible and how long that lockdown would become. But if you know me, you know I teach people struggling with romance to be practical and lucid about their desire, because for traumatized people, the longing for love can get very distorted and destructive. And as so many of us know through bitter experience, trauma wounds can sabotage any good relationship that happens to spring up in your life. But I'm sharing today this older video because I want to remind you what I believe is behind that longing for union with another person. Yes, the trauma wounds of limerence and attachment wounds and abandonment reactions can turn our most beautiful and noble feelings into great shame and regret. And it can throw your life way off course for a while. But the actual love you seek, the sense of healing and being met for who you are, of loving and being loved all the way, it's very, very real. So here's the video I made about that. It's very near and dear to my heart. I read a short story last week that was about emptiness and love. And in that funny thing that happens sometimes, 3 different people wrote to me within about a 24-hour period about emptiness and love. And I think a lot of us are thinking about those things right now. There's this harsh, empty, loveless feeling that keeps swooping into consciousness just for a sec during this quarantine period of our lives. But it's sounding the alarm that something huge might be missing from our lives. And like this one woman said, I know you'll think I'm crazy for holding on to the hope that some big love is going to come into my life and save me. Well, a lot of people might say, yeah, that's crazy, and they'd have some platitude about loving yourself or something, but I won't. I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I teach people how to heal from the effects of trauma during childhood. And one of the harshest effects of early trauma is the injury to our ability to connect with other people. It's like a chronic feeling that love can't get in, or a scared reaction when love does show up, or a set of defenses that block love from ever showing up at all. And as hard as it is to be staying at home right now with all the fears about money and safety and the future that this triggers, we actually have an incredible opportunity at the moment to go ahead and, I can't believe I'm saying this, experience that empty feeling. And I mean, normally there's a lot to distract us from it, whatever it was for you, shopping, vacation plans, work goals, dating apps, weed, meds, money, whatever made you feel like happiness was just around the corner for you. But with all those distractions diminished right now, what we're left with is all the crap that was under the rug, everything we put there, what all these letters I'm getting are about, that emptiness we're feeling, the instinctive knowledge that we are incomplete in a tragic way because we haven't fully experienced love. Now, nothing could be more important, by the way, just in case you're still beating yourself up and calling yourself crazy. I know I'm always saying how critical it is to face reality, to not get stuck in blame and fantasy that completely gives away the control of your own happiness, because that's fatal to your progress. But real love is not a fantasy. The fact that you long for it is natural and right and needs to be listened to. And that's why I'm saying that the emptiness you feel during this lockdown is trying to tell you something. It's a gift. We all need the courage to accept this gift, which means facing that emptiness for now and letting the tears come if you have to, and letting the awareness come too that you've been suppressing about the nature of your loneliness. Not so much where it came from, we know that, but why really is it happening now? And what would it take to free yourself to change and heal so that you could, in increasing ways, open yourself to love? Now, with childhood PTSD, it's so common to feel, especially after an experience of loss, like we're outside of love, like other people are in this world of goodness, but we're stuck outside the gates, like orphans. But remember, you can't be exiled from your own experience. Alone is always where we start, but our healing from all the false ideas that trauma taught us can bring us forward into being inside, in love, inside it. And by that I mean feeling it, sharing it, knowing it, having the highest experience of it that people can have, at least for a little bit in your life. It's that full experience of love that everyone is longing for. And it's not really a thing you do or that you get. It's a state of consciousness that you go into. And I think this is why it feels like a walled city when you're on the outside of it. Trauma or no trauma, it can be hard to come in from that place, but it's the place to aim, and it's worth fighting for. So I think before too long, this lockdown will end, and I don't know about you, but I want to face everything that isolation has been teaching me, because I have so much I want to learn and become. And normally I'm making videos and programs about practical changes to make life full, right? And I've got a bunch of new videos and a new program lined up, and that's coming out soon. But today, while this worldwide isolation is still weighing heavily on us, I wanted to make this one special video about not the fullness of life, but the emptiness, especially now when so many people are feeling like it's too much to bear and they want to escape it or control it somehow. But what if you just let it happen? With all the dignity within yourself and the safety of knowing that the isolation is going to pass and the distractions will return with full force very soon, and you can hide in them if you want. But what if just for today, you just faced it, this emptiness, this space in you where childhood trauma stole your natural ability, your instinctive knowledge of how to love. And even though you've created a lot of good in your life, it drove you toward the sorrow and the regrets that are haunting you right now. I have great news. There's still time. And this is what I wanted to say to the people who wrote me, and I want to shine a light on a few myths that need to be set straight so that even as we take practical, common sense steps to heal our lives, we aim not at being just commendable or reasonable or appropriate, but at being fulfilled and at reaching the place that we're longing for, that we were born to find. Okay? So first is, real love is not a transaction, and it can't be negotiated or demanded of anyone. What you didn't get as a child is gone, and it can't be replaced by humans. But real love is still here, and what shows up in your life is a gift to you from something far more powerful than yourself. And the reason this longing for love won't go away is because you're made for it. And the reason it's so liberating when it happens is because for once you don't have to be a genius and work hard and make something happen. It just arrives in our hearts one day as naturally as hunger or sleep, but it's not cyclical like that. It's a transition, a maturation, something more like puberty really. and it takes over and you change whether you want to or not. But it's not coming merely from the body, and we don't seem to be able to choose whether it begins. We can choose a lot of things, including many forms of love, like duty and service and being part of a family and taking care of other people. And those can go a long way toward healing that emptiness. But that big love that's signaling itself through the emptiness you feel is not something that you can make happen. It's more like it's making something happen through you. And they're good things, even though it can make things pretty messy, but good things that ultimately benefit you and the other person and perhaps everyone. Now, you can screw it up, definitely. You can distort it and try to turn it back into some kind of negotiation or get obsessed on it or destroy it even, because everything good in life can be abused. And if you have childhood PTSD, you've already absorbed way more than your share of that. But you can't remove real love out of existence so long as it's flowing through you. It may be inconvenient or terrifying, but when it's happening, even with all the emotional overreactions of CPTSD, all you can really do is your best. And you just try to be honorable. You don't be a jerk. You don't act like an entitled little baby, or you don't pull emotional blackmail moves, right? We just have to do our best, even when we don't know where it's going. Even if it usually turns out that you don't get what you would have wanted, there's a way to go through it that deepens you and makes you stronger. You've been conscripted into the greatest project of all time, which is to bring more love into the world, and there is no greater good. So let yourself be part of it. Second, I say this to a lot of women and men I've coached. You get to want love to turn out the way you want it to turn out. Now, just because everything in your life so far was a disappointment doesn't mean you can protect your heart by setting your sights way low down here. If you're going to struggle with love, struggle for what you really want. And you want the real thing, trust me, the real thing. When I ask people what they really want and they say, a life partner, or they say a long-term relationship or companion, or they talk about getting needs met and things like that. Don't set your aim at what you think you'll likely have to settle for. Set your aim for what you want. And what you want is the one. You'll have plenty of chances later to lose that person or to never find them or to settle for number 2 or 3 or 4. There's no guarantees here, but I'm telling you, get clear what you really want and wear it with pride. Don't act cool about it. Don't crap fit. You know that word? I have a whole video about it. You get so good at fitting yourself to crap when you're a kid that you can't stop. You take a crappy person or a situation and in your mind, you make it okay. You think, I can make this work. Well, don't make it work. Don't try to hedge your bets and pretend you're okay with whatever, or you're going to get whatever. You've been getting whatever all of your life. And that empty space inside of you, it's made of whatever, okay? The only version of you that anyone's going to fall in love with real love, is the real you. And if your childhood PTSD is mucking that up with a lot of defenses and fear and anger and grabbiness, then healing is very likely going to be a very big asset for you. And you might need to heal first a little bit. And in that case, you are exactly on the right channel. And finally, the third thing, and heads up, I got to talk about God here. And if you're not into that, I invite you to just adapt what I'm saying to what makes sense to you. But don't let anybody tell you that the idea of perfect love is crazy. It is the most real thing there is, actually. It's how we're shown spiritual reality. And it's an experience of seeing through God's eyes, if only for a little bit, right? So that we can know the truth of our oneness with all things. That's the place where we want to be. That's where we truly live. We're there all the time, even though we'll almost never be conscious of it. Now, trauma can tear us out of knowing this ever, but it can't actually take it away. It can't change what is our home. You're part of it. And through your love of another person, if you can keep healing and open up to it, you can experience it, that oneness. That's the thing you're craving, oneness. Now, maybe you've experienced this. It's not a trick played by chemistry. It's your awakening, and it's an intense spiritual experience for anyone. And if you have that trauma in your past, your attachment issues can kick in and you'll want to grab hold and stop the fear. And unfortunately, this can take you right out of that experience. And it doesn't always work out like you'd hoped, but whatever you do, even if you screw it up, It expands you and it raises you up into who you really are. Now, I get letters from people and they say, oh, but you don't realize I'm almost 40 or I'm 51 or I'm 67 or I'm 75. Here's what I learned from my friend Gladys, who found her great love at age 80, just a few years before she died. There's still time. And for all you know, the greatest love you could possibly know may still lie ahead of you, especially if you keep healing from what happened in the past. And that longing you feel when you're lonely, especially now, has a message for you, that it's real, and it's pointing the way toward your home. When I help people sort out their dating lives, one of the most common things I find that's standing in the way of having a happy relationship, especially for people with childhood PTSD, is that they're not willing to be clear what they really want. They're not clear with other people. They're not even clear with themselves. So one of the things that I teach everyone is to get clear about what you want. What's your vision for your life? And what kind of partner do you actually want? How do you want things to land in your life? Do you want to be married? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to go slow? Like, these are things you get to decide for yourself. And you get to choose the qualities in other people that would be important to you, necessary for you, or that would be a deal breaker for you. So when you make a list of what it is you really want, over time, you're going to be able to refine this list, and you can discover new things that you realize are important to you and new things that you've now learned the hard way will not work for you. So the more conscious that you can be about what you really want, and the more careful you can be to honor what you really want, what you don't want as well, then the easier it will be to stay out of heartbreak and entanglement that causes you to lose years of your life and delay when you finally do find a good relationship. So that's the thing about bad relationships. They don't just keep you from having a relationship in that time, but they deplete you. They can be destructive to your personality. They can make it a lot harder for you in the future to have a happy relationship, just because you end up with these injuries emotionally that you just go, oh, here we go again. And you fall into a negative pattern that can push people away. So it's really, really important to go out with people who are good, who fit you, who don't have red flags blazing, but who are demonstrating good qualities that you should be looking for. And do you want to know what I think they are? I'm going to list them for you. Okay. So just a little background. Usually the best way to meet prospective partners is in real life through activities that you actually love doing. And you've heard this before, but to do that, to meet people in real life, it means that your job right now is to be doing activities that you love. That's how you're going to find people who have compatible things that they love doing too. And it will bring you into contact with people who fit your vision. You'll meet all kinds of people. You know, everybody knows that dating is a little bit of a numbers game. If you know what you're looking for, if you know what your vision is, and then you have contact with lots of people and meet them, you can't help but start finding people who begin to fit what it is you do want. That's how you do it. And the one advantage of meeting people online is at least you know it's a date, right? When you meet people out in the real world, there's some testing the water that goes on before you know if it's a date, or you declare that it's a date or ask them out sometimes. So that's part of what I'm going to teach you here about qualities to look for. It requires looking for what I call green lights. All right, let's just call it green lights. I heard that word from Matthew McConaughey in his book, his autobiography, and he would talk about something really nice happening in his life, something positive, and he'd go, green light, with his nice accent. And I just got that. I think it's really the opposite. There's a red flag, which says stop. There's a green light, which says go. So looking for signs that somebody is a good person to date, what are the green lights? 1, it is a feeling in you that you feel romantically attracted to them, and they show you in big or small ways that they're attracted to you. And I know that sounds really simple and it sounds obvious, but how many times have you gotten it wrong, right? So you won't always know if you're reading their signs correctly, but either they seek out a conversation with you, or when you talk to them, they seem happy to talk to you and they make eye contact and they smile and they act interested in what you say, and they put a little effort into keeping the conversation going. Now, I know there's charming people out there who aren't really interested and they might do that. I'm going to tell you, several signs that you look for to see if it looks like a series of green lights for you. So that's one of them. They need to be interested. You need to feel it. You need to see signs that they're feeling it too. All right. Second thing, They are not already in a relationship. Again, that sounds really obvious. How many times have you gotten it wrong? So there's no green light for people who are kind of entangled in other relationships or seeing people right now. That's a heartache waiting to happen. Clarifying this with someone that you've just met in a gentle way. One totally socially acceptable way to do that is to, and you can simultaneously, you can find out if they're available and also let them know you're interested by saying, oh, so, that's interesting what you say. So are you in a relationship? And we all know that that's something that people say when they're kind of wondering if maybe they could date you. So I'm just giving you, this is a gentle, socially acceptable, not in people's face way. Also, you can save face if they go, why, yes, I am. That's my girlfriend over there. You can be like, oh, great. And you didn't just fall all over yourself for them. You're just getting information you need to know. Do I have a green light? All right, third thing. So let's say they show signs of interest. They're not in another relationship, and one of you suggests getting together sometime. If you're in doubt about where they're coming from, if they suggest this, or whether they mean it to be a date, your mission is to get that clear, ideally before the first date. But it's possible sometimes people do this as friends and you don't know yet and you don't want to force the issue. Okay, so the worst case is you go along as if you're friends, but you don't do a second thing with that person unless it is clear that it's a date, that they are in fact interested. And at that point, if you went on one thing that you thought was a date and you have to ask them if it's a date and they say no, yeah, you could still stay friends with them. There hasn't been like a great love lost or anything. But if you struggle with emotionally unavailable people, I would just say, if you feel attracted to them and they're not into you, they're just not a good person to be friends with. It's going to be just kind of like draining you of your emotional availability all the time. Your choice, though. All right, number 4. When you meet online, you're generally putting your information out front about what you're looking for, what's going on in your life, what your status is. And you can read from other people, what are they looking for? And if you both decide to meet in person, it's a date. You've accomplished certain things that you would otherwise have to do through the whole ritual of what we just described in the first 3 points for meeting in person. So if you met online, you can skip through 1, 2, and 3. Here we are at number 4. So this applies no matter how you meet. They demonstrate an interest in getting to know you. They don't just talk about themselves. They don't just try to impress you or talk about outside things like news or the weather. They talk about you. They want to know about you. They ask questions. Now, anyone who is healthy and looking to be in a relationship will have big questions about who are you. That will be the number one thing that they want to know, is who are you? So that's something to look for. That's a green light. All right. 5. They listen to what you say. They understand you. They get you. Now, not everybody in the world understands and gets you, but that's what you're looking for. Somebody good to have a relationship with. They're interested in you. And it's not just you two people taking turns asking questions and answering them like some sort of rote behavior. All right. Number 6, they make it clear that they are interested in you and this is a date. That is a green light. There are circumstances where it's okay, even though it's awkward, to get to know someone through 1 or 2 or at most 3 get-togethers or dates. If you find yourself falling for them, but you're afraid to ask and you've been hanging out with them for a while, the answer is probably that they're not interested in you. They will usually let you know. You're avoiding the question. Why? Because either you know the answer or you fear the answer is no. But courageous, healthy people like to get this clear. They just want to know, and they don't want to go too far without knowing, is that where the other person's coming from? Is that what this is? I encourage you to do it too, so that you don't waste your lovely romantic possibilities waiting around in nervous limbo, afraid to ask, thinking you're not worthy to know, or thinking there's really nothing shameful about being interested in somebody and finding out they don't feel the same way. It's totally dignified to ask and then respond accordingly by stepping back. All right, that's 6. The 7th sign that someone is good to date is that they're open about themselves and what they're looking for. It could be a red flag if they jump right in and tell you tragic stories or rants about an ex or, even the trauma that happened to them as a kid, even though you have that too. It is boundaried not to go into deep stories that are emotional on early dates. All right. First, you get to know somebody. Later, you can talk to them about it. So if people are, leaking out all the sad and angry stories and the rants, then they might be in healing mode, but they're not in relationship mode. They're not ready for a relationship yet. The openness to look for is about their vision for themselves, what they want in life. Do they want marriage? Are they interested in having a serious relationship? Do they want what you want? Do you have matching visions that go together? If yes, that's a green light. If no, then that would be a reason to stop dating them again, because sure, you can fill time by dating somebody who's not going to be a match. But if you have childhood trauma, and this has been a struggle for you, that you end up in relationships where you're attached but not happy, I'm just really going to encourage you, like, only get into the relationship that you really want. Just stand up for what you really want. So there are major compatibility issues that can be avoided when you get that on the table within 3 dates. All right, number 8 is, are they logistically available? And that means they live in the same general geographical area as you. They have time for a relationship. They don't have anything in their life that would get in the way of a committed relationship. And I'm talking about something like, an ex living in the basement, or a job that keeps them out of town most of the time, or they're about to move to another country. That is a red flag, not a green light. Number 9, they treat you, this is a sign, this is a green light. They treat you and everyone else you see them interacting with, food servers, other drivers, people on the street, animals, they treat them with kindness and respect. That is a green light, a good sign. All right. Now, anybody can put on an act early on, but if they can't put on the act in the first 6 dates, it's not going to work out. So watch for that. Watch for how they treat other people. Number 10, they're honest. If they notice the restaurant forgot to charge for the dessert, they tell the restaurant. If you ask them a question about themselves, they answer. They know how to be limited in talking about personal information, but they don't lie. If you catch somebody in a lie in the first 6 weeks, trust me, it's going to get worse. All right. They are, number 11, considerate about making plans with you. They make clear when a plan is firm. They show up when they say they'll show up, and they call if they're going to be late. They take care of that. Generally, they call when they say they're going to call, and they never leave you guessing about whether something they invited you to do was an invitation or just a random idea tossed out that's not actually happening. You've probably been there before. All right, the 12th sign that someone is good to date has to do with how you feel when you're dating them. That is the biggest thing. How do you feel while you're dating them? You feel good. That's a green light. Not just because, there's hope that the lonely nights are finally going to end, because that can kick in and sort of cloud judgment about how does it feel. But that's really fear about what it would feel like if you weren't with them. It's nice to have somebody in your life. It's a legitimate thing to hope for, but it's not enough. And it's not enough to just feel attracted or crazy about them. By itself, those feelings are not a sign. The sign is that as a result of meeting them and spending time with them, you feel lifted up. You find yourself being a better version of yourself, and in meaningful ways, like you are taking responsibility in a better way. You're taking better care of yourself. Perhaps learning something new instead of just frittering away time. You want to be a better person. You want to do more. You want to be more. You want to be healthier, positive, be fulfilled. Those are signs that someone is a good influence on you and therefore a good match for you. And ideally, 2 people have this lifted up feeling from each other. 2 people feeling that way, that's a good sign. People who had a traumatic childhood can be very difficult to be in a relationship or marriage with. I get a lot of letters from hurt, scared people who are going through a lot of pain because their partner has CPTSD and is not yet able to calm their symptoms. Now, do I think people with CPTSD are always worth being with? No, not always. But great relationships are possible when you both understand what CPTSD is and you're both working on strategies to halt the hurtful and chaotic dynamics that can very easily pull couples into a dark vortex. With knowledge and goodwill, healing can be totally positive for both people. And can I just say this to the people who do choose to love people with CPTSD? I love you for this. I'm grateful to those of you who care enough to ask how to be a good partner to those of us who are affected by hard stuff in childhood. A loving and stable relationship goes a long way to help heal human beings who are hurt and feeling alone. So thank you for that. All right. I first just want to acknowledge that the symptoms of childhood PTSD are on a continuum. They come and go. They might be little things and they could be very serious things. And before I get into the nuts and bolts of how to be with someone who's having these symptoms, I just want to say, under no circumstances should you put up with abuse. And I'll get into that a little more at the end. But yes, people who had a hard childhood are totally worthy and lovable and can be worth a bit of trouble sometimes. And yes, we can be complicated and confusing and needy and exasperated sometimes, but also wise and capable and warm. So here are some tips to help you understand your loved one and offer support while also taking care of yourself, because there is no good relationship where people don't take care of themselves. So first of all, it may be helpful to know that a lot of what your partner is dealing with is called dysregulation. This is a real and measurable nervous system phenomena that can cause a person to feel, spaced out, discombobulated, emotionally overreactive. You've probably seen that, and struggling to think straight. And you're like, Dysregulation happens to everybody to some degree sometimes, and we all naturally recover from it eventually. And this recovered state is called re-regulation or self-regulation. Now, self-regulation is often used in the context of emotional dysregulation, which is one piece of the pie, emotional. But nervous system dysregulation is not just emotions. It's the endocrine system. It's the immune system. It's blood flow. It's the vital signs. There's a lot of things that are really not under a person's control directly, but they can be calmed using techniques. So the recovered state, it's called re-regulation. And the thing for people who have PTSD from childhood, getting dysregulated can happen a lot more frequently. It can be a lot harder to climb back out of. And so a person who had trauma compared to somebody who doesn't, the traumatized person is probably spending more time dysregulated and having a harder time climbing back out of it. And it's during those dysregulated times that the problems can really get in. Now, it's important to remember the tendency to get dysregulated is not your partner's fault, and it isn't your fault, even if your partner thinks it's your fault when they're upset. Now, everybody does that sometimes, right? We blame other people, but the symptoms you're seeing are just what PTSD looks like when it's not very well under control. And technically, how you deal with your partner's dysregulation could influence how quickly they can get re-regulated. If you just start yelling or threatening to leave, you're not likely to calm things down. So unless you mean it, unless that's really what you want, I'd recommend don't make threats. Don't do things that increase the drama. It just doesn't help. You don't have to be a doormat either. So it's important for you to remember, even if your partner can't see it in the moment, that it's not your fault that their feelings got this intense, and you're not responsible for making it better right now. It's not your fault, and it's not your job. It's the person who has PTSD. It's our job. We've got to learn to re-regulate. We have to. Nobody can regulate our PTSD brains for us. We're the ones who've got to take steps to change it. And we're the ones who have the option of self-control. We also have the option to leave if somebody is just so, destructive to us that we cannot self-regulate. That's where people get into like a no-contact relationship with an ex or perhaps a family member. So as hard as it may be to draw upon when you're feeling the urge to lash out or run away from loved ones, the inner resources are there to calm your symptoms. It's not the fault of the person with CPTSD, but we are the ones who can make the change in here. Okay, that said, here's what you can do. You can support your partner as they try to heal, as they learn to re-regulate. You can ask or suggest that they try to heal. You can suggest they read a certain book or try a certain technique, but you cannot make it happen. Not on your timeline, not against their will, and you can't do it for them. If only you could, right? I get a lot of mails and comments from people who are like, how do I make someone heal? And you can't, but you can offer support and you can suggest things lightly, but you must remember what is needed is understanding, encouragement, and then being willing to step back and detach a little to allow people to make their own decisions and find their own answers. It's genuinely the truth that no one person really knows what another person needs. And I sit here and I teach about this stuff every day of my life, but I never presume to know what another person needs. And so when you do that to a partner, you know what happens. They don't like it. They will pull away. They will shut down. It could delay things for them. Now, you might notice that when your partner is dysregulated, they can go from happy and goofy to overwhelmed and enraged, and then to emotional flatness, like nothing ever happened, all without you ever realizing what set this off. And sometimes they'll be dysregulated without any outward signs. They seem fine, they say they're fine, but then you notice they're not hearing a word you say, or they're tripping over things, or forgetting to show up for appointments. With some people, this brain fog aspect of dysregulation can be really pervasive. And it'll be tempting for you to think they're acting this way intentionally to show you that you're not important to them, or they don't respect you, or you might try to force them to go see an ADHD specialist and take medication. But hold on, because while all of this could be the case, it's most likely just a sign that they're dysregulated. And believe me, I'm telling people like your partner that dysregulation is not an excuse to be rude or inconsiderate. Healing while you're in a couple means two people meeting halfway, and your partner may need to make the effort to show you that they care. And you need to keep in mind that a brain thing might be temporarily blocking the signs of caring that you need to see. Like the emotion is there, but you can't see it on the face. So that's one thing. But maybe the hardest thing about a person with childhood PTSD is that they can be unreasonable. They get upset and you get blamed for things that you have nothing to do with. And I'll tell you a secret. If you keep presenting yourself as someone who has power to fix the PTSD, who has the answers, you will soon be having fights about why you haven't fixed it yet. And I'm going to bet you've had that argument before, maybe many times, where your partner believes that you have the key, because you sort of presented yourself that way, for them feeling better if only you would turn the key. But you won't because you're so mean, right? That's a way of thinking that I call outsourcing responsibility for healing. And I tell people with childhood PTSD to step out of that thinking and own the process. You know, I know, like, we're all at the effect of other people. Other people affect us very much, of course, but we must own the process of our healing and changing how we behave. And I'm telling you, as their partner, let them own it. It's totally okay and appropriate to offer comfort to a person who's in a PTSD response. And consistent love and stability are good things and definitely influence healing. But sometimes what love looks like, if you support a person and give them space to just, day by day, notice how their PTSD symptoms affect them, and let them recalibrate their response. That's what healing can look like. Maybe they're already in my courses for doing this, and that's how you heard about me. You can support your partner while they do the work and still hold a boundary against yucky behavior or abusive behavior that happens when they're dysregulated. So the way to do that is when you notice the symptoms coming on in your partner and they're starting to behave in ways that are making you feel scared or upset, you can take a step back. Your feelings matter. They matter a lot. You are half of this. But your partner who's having CPTSD symptoms right now, this is not a good time to try to talk things out with them or get what you need. You'll get much better results if you wait. And if they're pressing you to talk about their feelings, and we do that sometimes, then say, things are feeling a little intense right now, and I want to talk to you, but I want to wait until things are calmer. Now notice you're not abandoning them. That's a trigger you don't want to set off unintentionally. You're not shutting them down. You're making a plan to communicate in a better way. And if your partner doesn't want to let you do that, you get to do it anyway. Now remember, they're not themselves right now, so it's for you to do the wise thing for yourself. And remember, they will eventually feel calmer, and you can talk then. So what's helped me in my marriage, since I'm the one who gets dysregulated, is that I try to take responsibility to notice when I'm dysregulated, not say much until I can get myself re-regulated. And this is sometimes easier said than done. And the urge to, process the feelings sometimes is overpowering. Now, by process, I mean like talk, and you said this, and you said that, and even when I mask it as I statements, I felt horrible because you were just such a dick. Dysregulated talk, it's like drunk talk. Think of it that way, I even tell people, when you're dysregulated, do not drive a car, pull over. If you can't remember, if you're having like blankouts about how you got across the bridge, stop and re-regulate. And that's what I teach. I teach tools to re-regulate quickly, and then also long-term strategies to stay regulated more of the time. But you don't try to have a big major conversation about what's happening or to try to break down some horrible argument that you had while a person is dysregulated. If you really want to have communication, maintaining regulation is everything. It's everything. And so the person with CPTSD, that's the first order of business, is to learn how to do that, how to go slowly enough and gently enough that they can kind of stay lucid and in their body enough to talk about how they're feeling and not have this big emotional flashback come and take over, believing, you're just the worst thing. And you've probably been in that position, where they're just like blowing flame at you. And it's destructive for people with CPTSD to get into that blame place, because so long as we are blaming other people for how we feel, we can't recover. You're just trying to it's like, help me, fix me. Well, other people cannot. It explains so much once you understand that. It's like, oh, they can't. There's things that other people can do to support you. But until a person with CPTSD realizes what an inside job this is to self-regulate, there's going to be so much conflict with partners, so much conflict. So that little codependent dynamic of I'm going to help you, honey, I'm going to help you. It can be too much, but support is real. There is a way to support, and it's just to do your part to keep it from going down that road of yelling, fixing, blaming. All right. So you're using restraint on that side. The person with CPTSD is working on restraint as well and using tools, because ultimately none of us has a license to take out our frustrations on other people. And not even because some of us had bad things happen when we were small that affected us neurologically. It's not a license. It may be an explanation, but it's not an excuse. So here's a summary of things that you can do when your partner is experiencing symptoms. First, you can notice the dysregulation. Sometimes even if you don't say anything, just noting it to yourself, oh gosh, they're dysregulated again. And this can help you stay neutral and even supportive without getting sucked into the drama. Second, you can try to reduce overwhelm for your partner by slowing down, keeping your voice gentle, and not asking a lot of questions or making demands. And again, you don't have to mention that you're doing this. You can just do it and see if it helps. The third thing you can do is mention what you're noticing and ask what they need. You can say, hey, I notice this is making you a bit overwhelmed. Is there anything you need to make this easier? Or you could say, would it help if I gave you a hug right now? Because squeezing hugs can be really helpful, but you want to make sure it's wanted and expected. For a lot of people, a hug, especially out of the blue, it can set off more, it just triggers something. And so you don't want to set off more dysregulation, because it can feel constricting, it can feel threatening, it can feel controlling. But at the right time, a squeezing hug can be so comforting to the nervous system. So timing. Then if things start getting tense, it can help if you get a little space or a tiny bit of separation. And the trick is to do this without setting off an abandonment trigger. So let's say you're on the phone and you can hear your partner getting wound up. It's about to turn into an argument. You can say, I need 5 minutes apart, and make a concrete plan for when you're going to call them back. And that just 5-minute break can allow both of you to discharge the dysregulation and the anger that was bubbling up. If your partner uses my daily practice techniques of writing and meditating, yes, you can very politely, gently suggest, not demand, that they might want to do that. Or you can do it. You can do the daily practice. It's for everyone, and you can invite them to do it with you. But since any kind of comment about dysregulation nobody wants to be told what to do, but when a person is in a state of dysregulation, getting called out on it it can feel like criticism. Sometimes the kindest thing is to tell a white lie and pretend that you have to go to the bathroom just to get a few minutes apart. Whatever you do, don't resort to giving the silent treatment or storming out or threatening the relationship. Even if you know that you're actually going to leave, which you probably aren't, but even if you are, if that's what you know, announcing it to a dysregulated person is only going to lead to a blow up. So my advice is stay polite, stay kind, stay out of the drama. Let for both of you, for yourself. Partner might complain and try to get the conversation started again. But believe me, they will thank you later when their brain and emotions are re-regulated that you stayed calm and sturdy and didn't let things turn into a big fight. Well, people don't always thank you later, but they would if they could see the big picture of the fight that was just averted. Everyone is exhausted after a fight, and arguing can cost a person with childhood PTSD days of dysregulation where they're only quasi-functioning. It can cause people to, forego great opportunities. It can cause them to abandon things that are totally worthwhile. So calm is good. Steadiness is good. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that there is no scenario where you are obliged to put up with abuse, neither at the doormat level or all-out abuse, not emotional, not physical. So I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care who started the argument. You don't deserve abuse. And if it happens, the right thing to do is to remove yourself with kids, if there are kids, and get to safety. Anything that needs to be worked out can be worked out when things are calmer. And that would be the time to pursue professional help. But for you, if your partner can't or won't control abusive behavior, then it's very sad, but it's not best for you or your kids to be trapped like that. Okay, all that said, if you are blessed enough to have a safe, loving, and supportive relationship, that is just one of the most wonderful healing things that could happen for anyone. And it's a great gift for a person who had trauma as a kid. Not everybody is called to that kind of relationship, and some people are not healed enough yet to pull it off right now. But a good relationship is worth really putting your heart into. It's a good reason to work hard on yourself as a person. If you're a single person with CPTSD who longs for a relationship, keep working on your symptoms. You can become ready for a closer, more safe and stable relationship that's fulfilling for you. If you're with the person with CPTSD, there is hope so long as someone will cooperate with you to start calming the symptoms. So again, my love and appreciation to all of the partners out there who have given that to us and who make the world a loving place for us because of it. What if someone came into your life and had been in your life for years and you'd always loved them and they'd always loved you, but for reasons you couldn't understand, you pushed them away, you broke up with them again and again and again? That's one common pattern for people who were abused and neglected as kids. Has this happened to you? Even when you want things to work out, you find yourself self-sabotaging. Why do you do that? And more importantly, how can you stop? My letter today is from a woman I'll call Larissa, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I'm writing to ask for your advice on how to stop pushing love away. I've been dating the most amazing man I've ever met, ever," all caps. "He's so kind and gentle-spirited. Hots for each other since I was 20, and he was 30. I'm now 44, so he's 54, okay? We have so much in common, and being near him calms me so much in a way, but also causes extreme nervousness in my belly. When he's around, I feel zero desire to drink and almost no desire to smoke, both of which I abuse intensely when I'm alone." Here comes the fairy pencil. Okay, I'm circling that and these facts. I circle things. I'm going to read all the way through so I can hear where you're coming from, Larissa. And then I'll revisit some notes that I made here on the page, and I think I can help you. You write, "I don't know if I have limerence or what the heck is wrong with me. I've broken up with him like 10 times in 7 months. It's awful, but I can't seem to help it. These feelings are just too much. We're currently broken up, and my heart is so sad. Frustrated and angry at myself. He still comes by my store. Seeing him melts my heart, and I just bawl after he leaves. I have to fix this. 4 exclamation points. He's emotionally scarred from a horrible marriage and even worse divorce where the mother of his children took him to court for the entire 18 years of his children's youth. So that even though he has a great job, he had very little money for himself all those years. Now his children are grown, and he says he feels like he can date now. Before when he had no money and so much drama, he didn't think that it would be fair to anyone. I can tell he is as scared as I am. I was raised by an alcoholic mom and drug-addicted dad. They divorced on my 9th birthday. My father left my mom for another woman who spent 30 years doing everything she could to keep us from my dad. So at 9, I became the caregiver of my brother, who was a year younger, because my mom had to work at a bar and grill. Spent a large part of our time at the bar because no one could watch us. So we turned chairs into beds since we usually didn't get home until 3 or 4 in the morning. I was then responsible for getting my brother and myself ready for school hours later and was screamed at if I failed to be on time. Lots more terrible things happened that I don't have room to write about, but I now know they had their own CPTSD. It's been easy to forgive them, at least I'm trying to anyway. I then entered a 14-year loveless marriage, divorced 7 years ago, only to date men who turned out to be bums or kind of psycho. Bums or kind of psycho, yeah. I'm just laughing because it's just so true, right? Okay, been there. One was textbook narcissistic personality disorder, which I didn't know existed until he had me so screwed up mentally I thought I had literally lost my mind. I had to seek therapy, and I've been ravenous for healing ever since. Woohoo! It was intensely painful. I think that's where the fear of love is coming from. He was a liar, cheater, and manipulator. I'm still shocked. I could be so blind to it all. I love this letter. I know I have to stop drinking and have been trying. I've read Alan Carr's book and joined online communities, but it's been very hard. It feels hopeless at this point. I own a convenience store and sell liquor all day long. At this point, my employees and customers are like family, and we all rely on each other. They are my rocks. It's all I've done since I was 20 years old. It's like home. Anyway, what are some things I can do to ease my fear of love? This man clearly loves me. I feel very much in love with him. He will not let me push him away. I think he's the one, but I want to be healthy mentally before we get too serious. Please help, and thank you for your content. I'm learning so much, Larissa. And love and gratitude. Yeah, what a friendly letter. Thank you. I love your predicament. I'm very happy for you. It seems like you have found love. And now the struggle part 2 begins, is how do you deal with it? And yes, I know that one too. And there are things you can do. So it really jumps out. You grew up with an alcoholic mom and drug addict dad, and your mom working in a bar and grill to support you guys, and having to bring you to work and sleeping on chairs and going home at 3 or 4 in the morning and then having to go to school. Oh, Larissa, I know what that's like, and that is so hard. And I'm proud of you because you own a store. You did take care of your brother. You pulled it together. You have a relationship. You know, it's so understandable that you have these wounds right now that make it hard for you to kind of sit still and let love develop, right? So understandable, but you have so many things going for you. The big thing you don't have going for you right now is sobriety. And so I think I learned the daily practice I teach everybody. I learned it from a sober alcoholic woman. I'm not an alcoholic, but almost my whole family is alcoholic. And, as far as I know, nobody's ever gotten sober. I don't know. We're like not even in touch. My family is so decimated by alcoholism and addiction. I don't even know what's going on with everybody. But I will say that the people that I've met in AA, like the woman who taught me how to recover and who I now pass on these techniques to everybody. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are doing what we do now. That's what she taught me as how she got sober. She got sober in AA, and she worked the steps a little differently than, everybody. There's many ways that people do AA. I noticed you didn't mention it. You mentioned Alan Carr. I know that he's well thought of, but it doesn't work for everybody. AA it's a community. And, it's a community of people who have gotten sober. Some of them are still struggling with it. Some of them have long-term sobriety, and they can teach you how it's done. And everything that alcoholics tell me is that the only people that they would ever listen to is people who have actually experienced alcoholism themselves. And if somebody who had been a hopeless alcoholic and then became sober could tell them how they did it, that would be interesting to them. So I really recommend it to you. I know people in my family have checked it out and decided it wasn't for them and then kept on drinking, and they had their reasons, like, I'm not like these people. I think if you really want to step up and be ready for love, that destabilizing effect of like all that drinking, smoking less so, but smoking, a lot of people who get sober, they first deal with the alcohol and later the cigarettes when they can. When I first learned these daily practice techniques and I had horrible PTSD, I got better very fast, but I kept smoking for about 3 years. I was a heavy smoker. After about 3 years, Then finally I had something going on and a miracle occurred and I was able to stop because I was a big smoker. I get it. Smoking is re-regulating. It's a crappy form of re-regulation. It's not very good and it gives you cancer and you're not allowed to even do it inside. But that's part of the charm, isn't it? You get to like go stand outside and take a few deep breaths. So we got to find other things to do. There is a place where you can get that comfort and ease that alcohol brings in an environment that does not involve alcohol. It involves wisdom about how to live without it. And a happier bunch of people I have never seen. It's a great group. There are meetings that are very sad and depressing. Don't go to those. Check around. Go to different ones. It's the beautiful thing. I've always envied alcoholics because there's so many meetings. And, I'm somebody affected by family alcoholism. There are fewer meetings, but there are meetings for us too. And you qualify for that. That's what they call in 12-step world a double winner. If you have alcoholism and you are affected by family alcoholism. But generally the wisdom is deal with the alcoholism first. Don't even worry about the other one. You're in any 12-step program, you're going to be working the same 12 steps. Out several meetings, get a sponsor and work the steps. If you've never worked the steps, you have never really done 12-step. Literally, and it's about working the steps. And meetings that are depressing and sad are usually because there's too high a proportion of people who don't work the 12-step program. They're just there to like talk about their pain. And while everybody needs to talk, what the group is for is to carry the message of hope. So it's also very socializing. You can make women friends, and I encourage you, stick with the women, stick with the sober women, and learn from ones who seem to be able to have relationships themselves about how to do that. There's so much to learn about how to have a loving relationship. I had no idea. I used to think if I could just get married to a good guy, then it was just going to be smooth sailing, but it wasn't. There were some very bumpy years in the beginning, and I had the same thing. I was really like, skittish. I would get upset easily. I would very easily feel that, oh, you don't love me enough. And all my old stuff was coming up and it was really hard for him to deal with. And luckily we had enough good things in there and had taken our time before getting married that we had a strong relationship that we got through that together and grew through it. And, every marriage has its ups and downs, but that's okay. That's okay. What you say about this, the way he's very comforting to you, it's gone on for years. I love that. Well, I guess it could be an avoidance logic, but if he didn't have work and he had a lot of drama in his life, that sounds very irresponsible not to date you, but to do it now because he's free. I kind of like that. That sounds mature to me. So, but you both have been badly affected by trauma. You both are a little scared of intimacy. So here's some things that I would recommend to you. Don't move in. Have your own places. People who get all dysregulated and sort of triggered by intimacy, they need to have a space they can go to. So it's not time yet to move in. First, spend some time, at least a couple years, being in a relationship, but not living together. All right. And then try not to get, I don't know what your tendency is. If you don't get too enmeshed, you don't have to run away so hard. So we call that titration. If you would become a member, Larissa, that you could take all these courses, but I have one, it's about dysregulation. I have one about dating. I have one about connecting with people. The connecting one is all about it's all about like how to have better connections and deal with that difficulty connecting and sticking around with people and setting up boundaries and then opening our hearts. All of that is challenging for people who grow up with trauma. That's normal. So one of the lessons in there is called titration. And titration is a word borrowed from medicine, and it means give a little at a time. So a way that you can date is like a couple times a week, you get together. When you talk on the phone, keep it to 30 minutes. Don't text all day. Have a couple of dates, have it be structured, and have those dates end. Don't get sexual yet. I don't know, maybe your relationship is already sexual, but that will often trigger old trauma wounds before you're ready to handle them. You can do this the old-fashioned slow way. Old-fashioned works very well for traumatized people. Who knows, maybe they all had PTSD in the old days and they knew how to do this, but you go very slowly and you keep your life going. Now, I like that you have a store. Yes, you sell alcohol. I know of alcoholics who sell alcohol for a living, and they're okay with it if they have sobriety. So that would be something to check with your AA group. But you have this family at work. I love that. You have friends to support you. It's not all coming from this one guy. But I think it sounds like you guys might be called to be together. That's what it sounds like to me. I would get support around that. You've done therapy before. Do you need counseling now? Do you need to be part of a group of friends where there are couples where they know you and they can support you as individuals and just kind of be behind you? I think that really helps. That really helps. Being a couple who's isolated from everybody else, whose problems are private or secret or not known to anybody, that's a pretty hard path. But with support and being willing to share with other people what's really going on in your life, having people who you can safely, privately share. We had an argument last night. It was really hard. I felt like I needed to break up with him. I've promised him I wouldn't do that again. People who will support you through those moments. Trying to function as a tribe. So we have this person we love, and our tribe supports each of us, and it supports us as a couple. So set yourself up like that and go extra slow, double slow for people who are traumatized. And if you can, get that alcohol, get free of it, get free of it. I think if you would give AA a chance, you might just love it. One of the messages that's been just drilled into us by popular culture is that you have to love yourself before you can love someone else. And this is something people usually tell you when you've had your heart broken and you feel totally worthless, right? And for a lot of years, every time somebody said it to me, I just would feel like I must be some kind of different species than everyone else. Because there were times when I didn't particularly love myself. And in fact, sometimes when I outright hated myself. But there was never a time when I didn't love some other people very, very deeply. So why do people say this, that you can't love someone until you love yourself? Because actually, I think the opposite may be true. You can't really love yourself until you love other people. I don't think it's possible to be still incapable of seeing the beauty and goodness in other people and yet be able to see that in yourself. One comes with the other. And here's why I say that. When my life was miserable and I was isolated and struggling, it was somewhat driven by childhood PTSD and what had happened to me when I was a kid. But mostly I was miserable because of problems that I was having with other people in present time then, as an adult. And a good part of why I was having problems with people was because I wasn't very good at caring about them or paying attention to them, feeling empathy for them. Have you ever been in that place where you couldn't really give that extreme self-focus? Well, it's normal for adults with unhealed trauma, often because we're in pain and it naturally sucks the focus away from what's going on around us, the social dynamics and how other people are feeling, what their needs are, because our own needs are demanding everything we can possibly do just to hold ourselves together. And that self-centeredness, which comes from hurt and fear and anger, it's a symptom of childhood PTSD. It's a universal symptom. And it's not our fault we got that way, but each day that we're still not able to form mutually caring relationships with other people, we love ourselves a little less. Maybe you do okay for a spell, and then your PTSD flares up and drives you to lash out at someone, and you damage the relationship. Even as the words are coming out of your mouth, you're thinking, oh no. Here it comes. I'm doing it again. I'm overreacting. I'm being harsh. This person's never going to want me in their life again. And sometimes that's true. It's a terrible kind of shame, isn't it? If you've ever felt it. And when you feel that way, you'll sometimes find yourself among people who advise people like you and me to just love yourself. Just love yourself. You need to love yourself. And I'm sure it looks like that is the very thing that's missing, and that if we could just manufacture that self-love, everything would be great and fall into place around us. But how, right? Nobody tells you how. And I'd always think, if I could love myself, I totally would. I would do that, really. It's such a maladaptation of childhood trauma to not love yourself. But here's the secret. Self-love is not the fix that's needed. It's the byproduct of the fix that's needed. Something definitely needs to change. And when you change that, the self-love will come. But you can't go straight to self-love and expect everything else to be solved. It doesn't really make sense, does it? When you don't love yourself, think of it as a cry for change. And change can be hard. You're going to do it from just reading a book or taking a class or making a promise. and doing all these things only because someone is about to leave you and you're desperate to stop them. That does drive a lot of change, but changes that stick, especially changing the hurts that are installed in you at a deep level, these changes are rare because they take a lot of focus and they take a lot of consistency. But you can change, and there are 3 conditions. First, if you're like me, you're not even going to be interested in changing or willing to do the work unless there's a problem, unless really you're in pain. The old way stops working, and when that becomes really, really clear, and when you're exhausted with the consequences of not changing, it kind of lights a fire under you. And it's going to make you feel sick of your life feeling empty, and you'll be sick of feeling scared all the time that you're going to lose even more, right? Okay. The second condition for change is that it requires humility. Now, that's a weird word. It doesn't mean humiliation, although humiliation is something we're all very familiar with if we have CPTSD. It's a major part of a lot of people's traumatic childhood. Humility, on the other hand, is something you could think of like acceptance. Humility is an ability to face a problem without defensiveness and without blame. And normally, any kind of loss or failure triggers people, not just people with CPTSD, but all of us. And when we feel like we've done something wrong, we will often be tempted to start pointing fingers. And sometimes shifting that requires coming down a level. And you know that phrase, get off your high horse? It's like coming down to everybody's level. And instead of saying, well, you did this to me, or what do you expect after what happened to me? Instead, down at everybody else's level, you can soften your heart and be aware that you made a mistake, like everybody does. Maybe you have a harsh behavior that sometimes hurts people. For you, it could be anger, or trying to control people, or criticizing them, or ghosting them when you feel uncomfortable. So that would be a time to come down a level. But humility can also involve a step up, where you stop seeing yourself as this pitiful loser who's hopelessly damaged by childhood trauma and who can't possibly be expected to recover or change or show up for people. I've done that, can you tell? Because that's not true either. So humility is a gentle acceptance of reality. You come down from that blaming others, you come up from blaming yourself. And it's a beautiful state where you just kind of drop all the BS and the blame and the self-attack and just be with the truth of your situation. This is a powerful antidote to shame, just facing the problem humbly. We hurt people, we make mistakes, and we're strong, resilient, kind-hearted people who can make good on that. We can heal and bring more of our gifts to bear and contributing positively to the people around us. That part feels good. Humility goes a long way toward making it possible for us to make that change and to change the things that we didn't love about ourselves. All right, but here comes the third and hardest condition for change, and it's effort. If we're going to change, we're going to have to work at it. There's just no way around it. A desire to change, the courage to face honestly where we are now, and the willingness to work consistently, daily sometimes, deeply sometimes, and beyond our comfort zone. These are the things that work. These are the conditions: pain, humility, and effort. We hurt, we stop making excuses, then we do our best, right? So not rocket science, kind of logical. Now, these are not things that are just going to change automatically because you decided to change it. It's not rocket science, but change is hard. So these criteria, these conditions for change will set you up for a radical transformation over time. And I know this because I have both changed and I've failed to change many, many times. And when I've successfully changed, this is how I did it. I am today miles and miles beyond where I was in the beginning of my healing, and I have a long way to go. I don't even know where I need to go, just like everyone, but I'm way past the highest point that I thought was even possible for me in my life. And each time I was able to make a breakthrough and change and grow in my capacity to love people and listen to them and be caring toward them, I think, hey, you know what? I'm pretty good at this. You know what? I can do this. I'm making a difference. And when this is happening, I'm feeling it because I'm doing it. It changes everything. And I discover that I love myself. And when I love myself, I'm a lot more at ease about other people. So it's a positively reinforcing cycle. I couldn't love myself when I was focused only on my feelings and my hurts and trying to stop being self-hating and just love myself. I had to take steps up and look outward. I will say, when this started to really happen, this is when my spirituality went from a vague idea into a well of strength in me. I needed strength, not just to imagine change, but to hang in there with the changes I was making and not give up. Because there are always times when you're trying as hard as you can and it just seems like it's going nowhere. And you think, what is the point of all of this? And then out of nowhere, something good happens and you get lucky and you get a burst of healing, and then you have more capacity to pay attention to your relationships, to hear people, to be good to them. And then the good cycle continues and you find you love yourself. Now, if you're not loving yourself yet and you can't see this yet, I'm going to tell you, you have precious intrinsic worth and you are worthy to be loved even when, and this is true for every person alive, even when you can't love yourself yet. Don't get too wrapped up in the struggle. Don't go hating yourself over mistakes and things that you can't help. Keep your eyes on who you aim to be, the best part of you, and keep working to liberate that part of you out from under the layers and layers of all you've been through. A lot of CPTSD behaviors got there to protect you, checking out, being defensive, isolating from people. That's what layers are for. They are how you protected yourself when those were the only tools you had. Now, though, you're gradually adding new tools and you can release those layers and come back to who you really are. And who you really are is very, very lovable. Now, maybe some people can love themselves at will, but I can't. When I cleaned up my life, I became more considerate of other people, and that helped a lot to feel better about myself, to approve of myself. There were certain people who I loved hugely, even when I hated myself, but it wasn't the kind of love that did them very much good. It was a complicated love. I wasn't very present. I'm better at loving other people now, and that helps me be loved more, and that makes it possible to love myself more, and that's how this good cycle continues. You can just start exactly where you are right now. We're all learning to love, some faster than others, and just in case you fear that being loving and caring will just make you vulnerable to being taken advantage of or even abused, that's more of what happens when you don't have boundaries. You can love and have boundaries. As both aspects of yourself, the love and the boundaries, get stronger, it creates something like a force field around you. You don't get messed with so much. You don't get mistreated so much. You'll have a natural radar for hurtful people, and if they're unkind, you'll see their mistreatment for what it is very quickly. You'll get a better sense of who you should trust, who is solid, and you'll grow these qualities yourself. This is what will make you more open-hearted because you can afford to be. And it'll make you even easier to love right back. Your positive actions make you feel more real, more part of the world, more part of the forces of good. And that's what you really want and what will make you feel good about yourself. So you can't love yourself yet? No problem. Try just taking positive actions for yourself and do what you can to help others feel safe and loved too. I'm not saying be codependent or put up with abuse or forget yourself and just give all your energy to other people. I'm saying start taking positive actions. You know what to do. You know already. This is the part of you you couldn't feel before. But this goodwill within you is very powerful, and it's the most lovable thing of all. It's almost like you're not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it because it's true. A good and loving and mutually committed romantic relationship is a healing. Now, there's a lot of programming out there, ideas that we all get told that you shouldn't expect too much from relationships, you shouldn't even need a relationship, and you definitely shouldn't bring any expectations to the relationship. And there's a reason why people say these very particular pieces of advice, but on the whole, they're counterproductive to your very natural and good desire to find love and to get married if that's your heart's desire. And I know not everyone wants to get married, but in this video, I'm talking to those of you who do want it. No matter what Kool-Aid you drank or programming you received from toxic parents and a culture that loves quick gratification and shuns deep commitments, it's okay to want marriage. Your longing for it is a sign that it's right for you. And if that's your heart's desire, even if relationships in the past have been a disaster for you, or you can't seem to find anyone, or you're feeling totally lost in how people do this thing called love, I'm going to walk you through some steps you can take to prepare yourself to overcome problems that have held you back in the ways that really matter for healthy relationships, so that you can move past this phase of your life when your need to be loved for real hasn't been met. You can go into a new phase where you grow into being someone ready for love. Now, ready is a very powerful state. So how do you get from where you are now to ready? Basically, if you had trauma as a kid, romance is one big area where you don't just end up, held back and thwarted in the natural course of your development, but you can end up with new trauma. Yeah, if you're traumatized, relationships can bring new trauma, something even worse than the trauma that wounded you in the first place. Now, your intention is to meet someone to fall in love with, who loves you and who's a solid person and someone you can trust. And then when you think you found them, bam, they can let you down. And this is a nearly universal experience for people whose emotional needs were not met when they were little. It's a blind spot. It's a broken picker, as some people call it. You just can't quite pick the right people. You fall for someone and then they push you away, or they turn out to have some giant problem, like they're already in a relationship, or they have an addiction, or they just can't be there for you for one reason or another. And you wonder, why didn't I see it coming? Now, if you're like a lot of people with childhood PTSD, it's not even clear how this blind spot happens, or that there is a blind spot. You can't see it. Everything seems so good. And they said all the right things, and there were promises made, and your heart is wide open to them, and you were feeling really hopeful about the whole thing. But no, you find out how wrong you were. This is a pattern for people with CPTSD. And the horrible truth is, a lot of us then stay in those relationships or half relationships if we don't get left. And for no better reason than we just can't face the prospect of the breakup or of being single again. It's too triggering of old abandonment stuff. And so we hold on as long as we can. And whether it ends now or soon, we lose years of our lives this way. So if this is familiar to you and you're drained and you're confused, I want to tell you why this experience, this moment where you've just lost what you thought was a good relationship, is an incredible opportunity to heal. It's not a tragedy, it's an opportunity. When you get pushed out of a relationship with the wrong person, which you know they are because it didn't work, whether you know it or not, you've just taken a big step closer to the right person, because now your path is clear. And with some healing, the right person can find you. So if you're feeling ready for this good thing to happen, to meet up with the right person, I have some advice for you. The job in front of you is not to run out there and meet someone, not yet, but instead to raise the brightness of what I call your cab light. Have you heard me talk about this? I think it comes from a TV show, maybe Sex and the City. They kind of nailed the concept by calling it a cab light. And you know how a taxi cab has a light on top? And when the cab light's off, it means there's already a passenger in that cab. But when the light is on, hey, it's free. You can just put your hand out and the cab comes and it's for you. Well, this is a metaphor that refers to the vibe of someone who is ready and open to meet a really great new person, a cab light. Now, what happens when your cab light won't come on? Has this ever happened? You feel ready to meet someone, you're thinking about it all the time and maybe reaching out to people and putting in a lot of effort, but it's like no one can see you. You're not attracting interest, or you're attracting interest, but not the right kind or not the right people. That's a broken cab light, by the way, where you're trying to meet someone, but the only ones noticing you are people who are not safe, not appropriate, or not actually available to you. And if you're feeling anxious to meet someone, it's tempting to just rush in and think, oh, well, I can make do with this, or maybe I can make this work. Have you ever done that? No. Where you bond with that person and then you realize who they actually are. And then you spend the next 2 years trying to retrofit them into the person you hoped that they were the first time you met them. And you know how that ends. It's exhausting, it's demoralizing, it breaks your heart. Now, if you've done it more than once, it's really important to heal this part of yourself that takes unworkable people on as projects. Because unfortunately, you could spend your whole life suffering over it when instead you could be loved. So when your cab light's working properly and it comes on, good people show up in your life. People who are appropriate, interesting, totally thrilled to be with you. And as you get to know them, you can find out if there's truly a match there. But the pool you're drawing from is a better pool. It's a pool of people who see your light, not a cesspool where people will just knock into you. Okay, I don't know, calling it a cesspool is kind of gross and harsh. But if you can't see red flags, there is a world of pain that gets into your life via your romantic hopes and your sexual desires. Your heart is a portal, and you must not abandon yourself at this crucial point where bad things can get into your life. Because if you're wise and awake in the way that you date, you can reserve opening your heart until the person before you is right and worthy. Ta-da! So, how do you make this shift to care for your heart in this way so that it's safe to let your cab light shine bright? The first thing is getting honest with yourself about what is standing in the way. If you grew up with trauma, like abuse, abandonment, being demeaned, going hungry, not protected from danger, these hardships, even when they're over, can leave traces all over your life, like wounds, blind spots, pockets of low self-esteem that leak out even when you're on your best behavior. So for example, if your aim is to have marriage and children, then you'd clearly need to attract people with the same goal and who were capable of caring for kids and supporting life as a family. And if you want to have a marriage, then you'd only want to attract a partner who could do that, who's free to marry you, as in not already married and able and willing to make a lifetime commitment to you if things go well. So the question is, if you're not attracting those things, if you're getting entangled with the wrong kinds of people who can never be what you want, or you're not even trying, what are you communicating about yourself that's leaving these needs of yours just dangling out there unmet, unseen? If you're not attracting what you want, your cab light's not working. And if you're attracting incompatible people and then letting them into your heart and getting attached to them, this is going to be hard to hear. But this could be how you sabotage yourself into never having marriage and children. You need to be the visionary and the guardian who knows what you want and makes sure the wrong kind don't get in and block you from finding the right and compatible kind of person. You have to know what you want, and you have to be true to what you want. You can think of a working cab light as a set of signs that you give off that someone who is not compatible with you should stay away. If your cab light is working, you will not be attractive to people who don't share your vision. Did you used to hide that what you wanted was to get married? Well, there it is. You were sending the wrong signals. And people who didn't want marriage responded. They thought that you were a good fit for them. So that has to change. You want to become the person who gives off signals that appeal to healthy people who do want the same things you want. Healthy people look for the signs of what they want, and they stay away from people who communicate something different than that. Healthy people are looking for people who want the same thing and who show signs of being solid, healthy people themselves. The people who don't really care what signals you're sending are the messed up people, people who aren't healed yet, or the people who are actually looking not for love, but for a quick fix relationship, right? For them, the stakes are very low. They don't care. So if you're not clear who you are and what you're seeking, then your cab light can't communicate it for you. So in that case, you're going to get whoever you get, or nothing at all. But I do know you're not going to get what you want. So this is how we end up in empty and miserable relationships, or alone, or blaming the other person. But really the problem began because we were carrying around enough trauma that we just couldn't shine a light that would attract the kind of person we wanted from our heart. So the good news is you have the potential to change this, and it starts in here, healing the hurts that dim your light. And you do this both through brain healing and through a loving and honest self-assessment around where you might be putting up a barrier between where you are and what you want. Now, what kind of barriers am I talking about? Well, maybe you're not taking care of yourself, or you're letting TV and spacing out take up all your free time, or you're being way over busy. Being busy is not a status symbol, even though people pretend it is. When it goes too far, it's a fancy, socially acceptable way of isolating. Now, if this is your tendency, I urge you to fight it and to fight the 100 ways that your light gets turned off right when you need it. So what are some things that hide your light? Well, number one, being already in a relationship that's not healthy or happy for you. Bad relationships wreck your sparkle, right? They squash your confidence. And when you know it's bad, just get out fast. Maybe you're not in an actual relationship. Maybe you're in a limerent relationship, a fantasy with somebody you're obsessed with. Maybe you spend a lot of time thinking about them or thinking about someone you lost or someone you can't have. When healthy people meet you, they can't read your thoughts, but they can feel them. You know, they have a nervous system, you have a nervous system, and what other people who are healthy and tuned in can feel is that when you're lost in fantasy relationships, there's a big empty space where your emotional availability is supposed to be humming. So it dims your light. And though you might be thinking that you can hold on to fantasies for a while or stay in your unhappy relationship until you meet the right person, healthy people don't want to meet you like that. They don't want to be involved with people who are already attached or with people who are too insecure to be on their own when that's the right thing to do. You want to be a person who's picky like that, not someone who gets into a relationship that's compromised or demeaning. You want someone who cares about themselves enough to hold out for a good person, someone who has a big bright light shining themselves. They're the whole package. They're happy. They're into you. They're available. And I go deeper into this in my dating course. If you don't know about that, it's always linked down in the description section below. It's also on my website at crappychildhoodfairy.com with all my other courses and all the stuff I offer. But how can you tell if you're sending signals that you're not truly available? And this is where a loving and honest self-assessment comes in. To ask yourself if maybe there are barriers you're putting up that are keeping the good partners away. Addictions would fall into this category. Drugs, drinking, the use of porn, for example, are all things that people can feel like they're doing privately, but in reality, they change your energy, they change your countenance, the way the nervous system communication, what people see and feel about you. It's like the overall look and feel and the vibe that you give off. Unhealed people might not be able to tell the difference and they might not care, but healthy people can tell pretty quick and they're not attracted. So carrying a lot of anger, that's another barrier for sure. Also having a lot of drama or conflict. Not that you can always control this, but a lot of times a pattern of drama and conflict could point to a lot of wounding and a high probability that this is what you'd be like in a relationship. So just like addictions and anger, drama and conflict deserve to be at the top of your list for where to focus your healing when you're working on shining that beautiful light of yours. Another barrier is when your romantic energy isn't contained within you, right there, like ready to be shared with another person when the time is right and you decide. So you could be leaking that potential, that emotional availability all around you with maybe staying too connected to an ex or two, or being caught up in casual relationships where you have some vague plan to just get rid of those people if the right person comes along. It's easy to think that it's a small thing, and if no one really knows about it, what's the harm, right? It's not going to hurt your ability to meet someone new, but you know what my experience is? It dims your cab light, and healthy people who are looking for someone intact and capable of sharing their lives in a good way, well, they're just not likely to be interested in someone who has one foot in another relationship, even if that's a fantasy relationship. Healthy people can sense that. They're looking for a bright cab light. They're looking for someone who is totally there, who's honest with themselves about what they want, who's mostly healed. You know, nobody's perfect, but they're free of past entanglements. And it might be hard to hear, but I'm telling you, it's a very powerful shift to make. So even though it's been hard in the past, you can have great relationships. It just takes a little extra healing sometimes.